Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this footage is me running outside with a cheap gaming PC I recently bought because when I took it out of the box a big spider ran out of the back. Whoever said they're more scared of you than you are of them is clearly a liar. Looking at the back of the system I could see that there were more cobwebs inside. That said, I don't think £110, just under $150 was a bad price for this system, spiders included. So let's open it up and see what we've got inside. As you can tell, I bought this from Cash Converters or Cashies, and hopefully we've got a few decent parts inside this slightly worn case. Now there was actually a support number here that I removed for the sake of privacy. I'm not sure if there's an arachnid related helpline I can call. Honestly, nature really isn't on my side today. Here I was in the garden taking a quick shot of the PC, and then I noticed this little wasp inside a watering can. Meanwhile his buddy was crawling up the leg of my shorts and decided to sting me. So this system is a stone PC. I have heard of stone before, not sure if this has been altered slightly. It's a custom rig inside an old case or whether it came like this from factory, but as you can see from the sticker we have a Ryzen in here at the very least. I noticed that we have a Wi-Fi antenna at the back here as well, so there's an add-in PCIe Wi-Fi card, which I think, that's a nice touch as well. Not usually something that I find inside sub £200 pre-built systems. So let's remove the side panel. As you can see, a few cobwebs in here. A lucky spider has been making himself a very nice, potentially very warm home inside this old system. Not anymore. He made his escape when I got this machine out of the box. As you can see, just a few balls of dust as well everywhere. Nice to see that we have a graphics card in here and a 600 watt FSP power supply. I never had any trouble with these PSUs. I noticed that we do have two 6+2 pin PCIe connectors as well. Usually I crack open a cheap PC like this and we've got a 300 watt PSU, a GT 710 at the very best, but here looks like we've got a GTX card. So £110, $150 has got some sort of Ryzen system, which we will reveal later on in the video. The graphics card is a GTX 1650 Super, not just your standard GTX 1650. This is the Super variant. Still has 4 gigs of VRAM, but we'll test a few games in this one and then we'll have a dedicated video to this card and see how it's holding up in 2025 as well. This requires a single 6-pin connector, but as I said before, we do have another 6+2 pin connector as well, so 2 8-pin connectors as part of this 600 watt power supply, meaning we can upgrade. You may have noticed this single RAM stick. This is a single 8 gig stick of 2666 MHz DDR4. Now everything was coated in a layer of dust. Some things had a light coating, others a pretty heavy coating, but it wasn't anything that a microfiber cloth and of course my electronic air duster couldn't handle. I almost blew this stick of RAM out of my hand giving this a dust. Forgot the power behind this CompuCleaner air duster, just almost blew the stick of RAM across the garden. The GTX 1650 Super also has a few balls of dust inside, so this was next for the CompuCleaner air duster to handle. Quite dusty on the PCB as well. I took care of this with a soft makeup brush. This just got rid of all the dust pretty easily. I took the AMD cooler off next. I imagine this CPU was probably running quite warm for the previous owner because as you can see inside here, there are a few large balls of dust here too. I tried to sneak a look at the CPU model while we were here, but this was of course covered in thermal paste and I couldn't quite make it out at this point in time. And while the main components including RAM, graphics card and CPU cooler were out of the system, I decided to give this a quick blast with the air duster as well. A lot of this blew back in my face. Quite a mistake leaning over this PC case, to be honest, as I was blowing the dust out of it, but it cleaned up pretty well. Cable management here is actually pretty decent. There aren't too many cables coming off of the PSU. We have a DVD drive as well. This actually has a traditional SATA SSD here. There isn't a space on the motherboard for an M.2 SATA drive. But I'm not too fussed because I actually have all my games stored on a standard 2.5-inch SSD at the moment, so I can just swap it over when I want to test more games. As you can see, I rubbed the thermal paste off of the processor, and this was revealed to be a Ryzen 3 Pro 3200G. Pretty much the same as a standard 3200G, so we have integrated graphics, 4 cores and 4 threads. I think with the Pro versions we just get a few more security features for use in business scenarios. I'm not quite sure what the main changes are, but I think spec-wise nothing too different from a standard chip. You can see this PC tidied up pretty well, and with everything put back in place it was ready to try and game. As you can see, we have a WD Blue 500GB SSD as well. This cleaned up quite well after the dust and the cobwebs were blown out of it. Looks almost new, if I do say so myself. I think the CPU does need an upgrade in order to make the most of this machine, even with the 1650 Super in here, but this A320M ARM motherboard does support pretty much every Ryzen AM4 CPU, so we should be able to squeeze far more performance from it. I will test it as is initially though, with the 3200G and the 1650 Super to see how well it does. Everything fired up just fine. As always, a quick check in the DVD drive, make sure there's been nothing left behind, maybe a free film, something like that. I have had a couple of things before, I think Microsoft Word 97 and then a copy of the Titanic in another system, so always worth checking a DVD drive on a used PC. Now I do want to try and run some games on this, and luckily I managed to find an identical stick of crucial 8GB memory. We have 8GB of 2666MHz out of the box, so to speak, so adding another 8GB will really help, and single sticks of DDR4 these days are so cheap. You're going to want dual channel memory. It's going to make a huge difference in games, more so than the memory speed. Now taking a quick look in the BIOS first of all, and it's nice to see a pretty normal BIOS here. This uses a standard board and standard parts, so we can tweak a few things if we wish. This loaded into Windows 11, and at first I was concerned with the graphics card running in PCIe X8 mode, so using 8 PCIe lanes instead of the full 16, but then I remembered that the Ryzen 3200G is limited to 8 PCIe lanes, so I don't think it's going to affect performance too much with a 1650 Super, a pretty low-end card these days, but worth pointing out I think. This will be alleviated with a CPU upgrade. Now with a Ryzen Pro 3200G, a 4-core, 4-thread CPU, you are going to find yourself limited in a lot of titles. It's the 4 threads really that's the problem. If we were using a 3400G, a 4-core, 8-thread CPU, then we would have a far better experience. We'll start off with Apex Legends here, and as you can see we are hitting over 60 frames per second. This is with the lowest settings, albeit the texture option, which was set too high. We also have TSAA enabled. The footage you're seeing here is just from a practice bot match. Haven't played this in a while, so sort of jumped into a bot match here just for a little bit of practice, and in terms of performance it was doing okay, but as you can see by the CPU utilization, pretty much pegged at 99 to 100%, and the GPU is being held back here. It's a similar story with Counter-Strike 2, although that said we were able to hit at least 60 frames per second most of the time. This CPU will clock up to around 3700 MHz. Again, it's the lack of SMT that is causing our issues here. I wasn't sure how this thing was going to fare. I know that the 1650 Super is a pretty low-end GPU these days, but despite having just 4GB of VRAM, it can offer quite surprising performance, and we'll actually swap this CPU out for a more powerful 6-core Ryzen towards the end of the video. Cyberpunk 2077, it's going to be a struggle to keep a constant plus 30 frames per second. There will be times when you're going to see at least 40 FPS, as you can probably pick up in this footage, but in the busier parts of Night City you're going to hit 100% utilization on the CPU, and it's just going to cause things to freeze. But I think this system is a nice starting point for an inexpensive gaming build. GTA 5 Legacy Edition ran quite poorly as well. We had a few textures and buildings missing. You can probably see from this footage that a lot of the buildings, when we turn a corner or drive into a different part of Los Santos, will start to pop in again. Red Dead Redemption 2 also struggled a little bit. We were able to get at least 30 FPS most of the time, but going anywhere near busy towns, Valentine, Saint Denis, and the processor was really going to struggle, and it ended up holding our entire PC back. The GPU has a lot more to give. And speaking of which, let's try and make full use of the GPU now. Now when I bought this I knew it was AM4, so I was pretty sure that we could upgrade the CPU, and with the AM4 platform it is old now but it's still supported. We're still even getting CPUs released for it, I think, and as long as that is the case, it's still a great socket to get into, especially if you are on a tighter budget. Now the A320MR inside this thing may require a BIOS update, which is easy enough to do. We can just do that straight from the ASUS site. Just download a BIOS file and flash it on a USB stick, and once that's done we can pretty much run any AMD AM4 CPU in this thing. I'd probably stay away from the higher power ones because this is an A320 board, so it may have weak VRMs, may struggle in terms of power delivery. But I swapped the 3200G out for a Ryzen 5 5600 just to see how much more performance we could expect from a rig like this. You know, don't doubt the power of the 1650 Super just because it was performing quite poorly earlier. The reason for that, of course, is the CPU limitation. But if you want to throw a 1650 Super in a rig these days, I know it has 4 gigs of RAM, you may be quite surprised, as hopefully these gameplay results will show you. So we'll just jump back into the same games we tested just now, this time with the 5600 in the system and the 1650 Super. We still have the 16 gigs of RAM as well. Apex Legends here, we're getting around 200 frames per second. The comparative results will be up on screen for you to see. This is a far smoother experience. Counter-Strike 2 is running really well as well. We've got so much more headroom if we want to up the settings, perhaps run things on medium or high. With these online fast-paced titles like this, I just tend to stick with low settings. You want as many frames as possible ideally, but you also want a smooth and consistent experience which a better CPU can deliver, as you can see here. Cyberpunk 2077 is of course a pretty demanding AAA title even in 2025, and beforehand with the 4-core 4-thread 3200G Pro we were getting less than 30 FPS in a lot of instances. This time performance is a lot more consistent, and although the frame rate still sits at less than 60 FPS, this time we are hitting the GPU's limitation, so the card is giving it everything it has here. We could certainly benefit from some sort of FSR preset, be it quality or balanced, in order to push us over that 60 FPS threshold. But I ran the test before at native, so I stuck with native this time too. Grand Theft Auto 5 is also like a different game. At this point our frame rate has been boosted way above 100 FPS, as you can see here, and we're not having any problems with the Ryzen 5 5600 now. No issues with textures or popping or just random assets of the game appearing in front of us, and yeah, it's a far more pleasant experience here now. That's why it's worth bearing in mind that if you have an older AM4 system, perhaps it's got a weak graphics card, you think the graphics card is the problem, you may want to look into the CPU side of things as well, because it may just be that all you need is a processor upgrade to transform your rig. Red Dead Redemption 2 also saw some pretty hefty improvements here. The extra cores and threads of the 5600 really helped. But I hope you've enjoyed this look at my Cashi's spider-infested budget gaming PC. But let me know what you think down below. I'll be testing the 1650 Super, perhaps with the 5600 in a whole suite of games at some point too, to see how well it's holding up when it's got the room to stretch its legs, of course. But as for this one, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.